back. James Harden right on target. Bang, bang, George Niang to Paul Reed from Tyrese Maxey.
Joel
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Pick Swap Podcast. I'm here with a special guest, a guy you guys are familiar with, and that is RB from RB Philly Take. What's going on, my guy?
What's going on, Sean? Thanks for having me on, man. Excited to be here and chop it up. A lot of good things going on right now. A lot more than the last time we spoke, so definitely excited, man.
Yeah, we've kind of been through the ups and downs of Sixers basketball, kind of chopping through everything, dating back to the whole Ben Simmons stuff, the trade rumors, James Harden. And it feels like the vibes are a little bit better now. Like things are on the upswing. This team's playing a little bit better. And to kick things right off, we're starting off with Joel Embiid receiving Player of the Month honors from the NBA. Luka Doncic for the Western Conference, Joel Embiid for the Eastern Conference. No real surprise there. Guy just putting up absurd numbers. Tell me about what you think of this recent stretch of play from Embiid. Is this the best we've ever seen him play, do you think?
At the current time, yes. And I do think he's going to get better as well. One thing that we had talked about before is just his vision, the way that he's finding his teammates now, which is unreal for a guy of his caliber and his size. I don't think there are many big men in the league with vision like that. There are a few, but yeah, this is the best Embiid we've seen. I mean, the guy's nonchalantly putting up 35, 37, 40, 42 in a game, and it feels so easy. It feels so effortless. Like at any point in a Sixers game, I feel in the last couple months, you look up in the third quarter and Embiid's got 35, and you're going, how the heck did he get 35 already? It's so easy. He has been in pure domination mode, and it's well deserved. I mean, especially after the tough start to the season, you know, people were wondering, is it going to be the same Embiid that's always out of shape and then gets going? And he just continues to exceed expectations. And there's just many games where he continues to carry this team, and he's just so dominant. You know, he's just so confident. And I think he truly believes at this point, nobody can stop me. And I believe it.
Yeah, and he shows it every night, puts it on display. So I love to see it. To rattle off a couple stats just for his December, throughout the month of December, averaged 35.4 points, 9.9 rebounds, 4.2 assists, shot 54% from the field, 41.7% from three, led the Sixers to a 9-4 record, including that 8-game winning streak. Now sets the Sixers franchise record for most player of the month awards, broke Allen Iverson's streak with that, just climbing up the list for both the franchise and around the NBA, second in scoring behind Doncic in that. And I think that's going to be a very fun race to watch as the season goes on. And as you mentioned with that passing, to me, it feels like it's something he's really taken personal, especially this year, a career high 4.6 assists per game that he's averaging. That's kind of been a critique of him throughout his entire NBA tenure. And I think especially as it's compared to guys like Nikola Jokic, who tends to be, of course, Embiid and him mentioned in the same breath as the best centers in the NBA. I think Embiid takes it a little personally to be like, I can do this too. And we see that when he puts forth performances like that triple-double against the Thunder, things like that. So I can see the growth in that area, and just like the continually adding layers to this game. Like we're talking about the mid-range game that he's clearly so comfortable in and has become the bread and butter in his game. That wasn't even a part of his style when he came in the league. He was a post guy, a guy that played with brunt force, attacking the basket. To see him really lean on that mid-range game and just that becoming the main part of his game is a testament to the work that he puts in, the layers. And how much better do you think we can really see compared to the version of Joel that's in front of us?
I think what will come with the better version of Joel is just winning and getting to a certain point that he hasn't gotten to. And I don't think that's his fault. I think he just continues, like you said, to put in the work. He takes this personal. You know, Joel Embiid has been on a wild journey, not even in basketball, but in life. And, you know, when you look at his career, it's weird. You know, it's hard to tell how long he's going to be able to do this at this level. Some people think he can do it for another 6 years. Some people think he may only have a couple peak years left, but the way I look at it is every year he keeps getting better. And it's just hard to imagine what else he can add. But, you know, I said that last year to myself. I said that the year before. And, you know, how much better has he gotten passing out of double teams? How much better has he got with that little spin euro going to the basket? It's just unreal. It's to the point where they're double teaming him before he gets the ball now. Like, if other players on this team can step up and this team can come together and he gets to that third round, if he gets to an NBA Finals, I think what will be on display is just the greatness of him winning, if that makes sense, because you can do it individually. You can go out here on a regular season basis, but if he needs to stay healthy, that's my main thing. I think by setting by example of just staying healthy and being his best version in the best moments, I think that will put on display the best Embiid we've seen, and I hope that we see it.
Yeah, totally. And that is going to come in the postseason. That is going to be the true test for him. And he's well aware of that too. He totally understands and is prepared for that. And health is always the biggest thing. We haven't really had a postseason where Joel came in fully healthy, except for that post-pandemic one, which Ben Simmons was then out for that one and they got swept by the Celtics. So a true postseason where he's fully healthy, has a full team around him. I think the sky is the limit. I think he can break a lot of the narratives that tend to be holding him back. And to touch on the team as a whole a little bit now, coming off a win over the Pelicans last night, a solid win coming 3 nights after they lost to the Pelicans. Zion Williamson, a guy who obviously kind of changed the game when he came out with the hamstring injury there. Disappointing to see that because he is some sort of special player and a rare blend of just strength, athleticism, and burst that I don't think the NBA has ever seen before. I did think the Sixers, even despite the 26 points that he ended with, did a decent job of ensuring that they kind of protected the paint, used that kind of wall tactic. What was your main takeaways from that win over the Pelicans, and how much of a good feeling is it kind of getting revenge just a couple nights later?
Yeah, I think it's a huge win. You come out and you play a Pelicans team who has a really nice young core, by the way. The Pelicans are building. That CJ McCollum trade might go down as one of the most underrated trades in the last couple years. I mean, to go and bank on a guy like that, you were losing at the time. Then they end up going on a little bit of a miracle playoff run. Then you add CJ and you bring Zion back into the mix, which is just a kudos to them. But that game last night, I thought the best thing about it was matching the intensity that they brought in the previous game. The way that their crowd was into it, the way that they were, just dogging us down the stretch. We didn't look like we could hang. We looked like we were slow, not even athletic compared to them at all. Like we just looked completely outplayed and out hustled. And the way that we came back and fought, and really the big thing for me was the way Joel Embiid and James Harden were utilized down the stretch. It's come a common theme. Every game where we utilize that two-man game down the stretch, it's almost virtually unstoppable. And when you have other guys that can contribute on the outside, because Tobias didn't even play well, Melton didn't even play that well, but Tyrese Maxey gave us a little ounce more than he's given us. Then you have George Niang coming off the bench, hitting 4 threes in the first half. When you get those kind of contributions, they don't have to be skyscraping, right? They don't have to be like so major. Joel Embiid and James Harden playing like that can beat anybody in the league. And I think I just took away the domination factor. Like you said, it was a banged up type of game, but still the Sixers put a stop on CJ McCollum much more than they did nights ago when he embarrassed us. And that's how you respond. And that's, kind of what you have to do in a playoff series, right? If a team comes out and bangs you up, you need to come out and respond. And I really enjoyed how the Sixers didn't stand back and kind of go into that game with the mentality like, oh, we're just not on that level yet. No, they went in and said, we're going to win this game, and they got them back, and I thought it was huge.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that totally stood out to me was them just leaning on the James Harden, Joel Embiid pick and roll, which is something that I am thrilled with. I can't get enough of. And it kind of breaks away from the isolation heavy ball that we see too often down the stretch. And that's such a live or die just style of play and just kind of mindset that they go with. And I was happy to see them kind of looking to optimize each other. And Harden specifically, I didn't think it was his best night overall, but he still just does the job of running the team, creating looks. I thought he had a couple that he set up Montrezl on that he either smoked at the rim or couldn't come through with. But that is like a testament to Harden for making that happen. And that's another conversation that I did want to bring up is Montrezl Harrell has become the guy that is essentially the backup center at this point. Paul Reed is so deep in the mud at this point after starting out the season looking like he had the inside track on the starting job. That's kind of fully evaporated. So what's your takeaways from Montrez, the backup center situation as a whole? And do you think the Paul Reed fight is over?
First off, I just want to say I love Trez. A lot of people get on him. I know he has his limitations. At the end of the day, I'm always going to ride or die for a guy who will go out there on the simplest of layups, the simplest of dunks, and just start screaming at the crowd. And he was chirping last night with, I think it was Herb Jones or somebody, and you never get enough of Trez. So I'm happy for him. I'm glad that he's playing. It's very weird when it comes to Doc Rivers. One thing I will give Doc credit for, Yesterday, he didn't really go to that death lineup. Well, I call it the death lineup. We usually see it at the end of the third quarter. It's been at the end of the first quarter, but we didn't see that. He kept James Harden in the game. I thought that was a good adjustment. But when it comes to Trez, I think he's going to be the guy moving forward. And it's not that Paul Reed doesn't have potential. It's not that he isn't on that level or can't be on that level. It just goes back to Doc's MO. It goes back to his philosophy. Whether I agree or disagree, well, it really doesn't matter. But Doc Rivers will always ride the hand of the vets. And it's very weird. There are guys that show potential. Paul Reed was playing in the playoffs last year. And that ounce of just, struggling or that ounce of just coming out for a couple games and not looking yourself, that'll get you on the bench. I mean, another guy, Matisse Thybulle, same thing we're going through there. You could think back to Isaiah Joe, Bassie. They show a little bit of struggle and they don't get an opportunity. I don't think that's fair, but it's just how the tide goes with Doc Rivers. And I really think the one thing that people do neglect, just to kind of favor a little bit with Doc to play both sides, we need experience, right? We're going to be heading into the playoffs. You can't go into the playoffs with a backup center that can't do anything offensively. And you need a guy that has that experience. Now, again, you could say Trez can't do anything defensively, which, yeah, I think that's going to be an area to be addressed come trade deadline. But for now, I think Doc just likes to go with his guys, the guys that have more experience, that have played. And yeah, it's really weird. Trez I think he had a stretch where he sat out 5-6 games, and then he's been back ever since, and he's playing regular minutes. So I can't put my finger on it. I don't know what the ideology behind it is, but I've been happy with Trez's play, and I know his limitations, and I think he's getting more comfortable.
Yeah, a lot of great points there. And I was a Montrezl Harrell guy leading into this year. I've been a fan of him since he was at Louisville, since his time with the Clippers. The way he's bounced around, he's just a fun player to watch, always has been. I don't think we're getting the best version of Montrezl Harrell by any means. I think he's had far better years. This guy was a 18-point per game scorer, sixth man of the year at one point, and he's just not quite that player anymore. I think he's been better of late. I've seen some flashes from him, but there's just little to no verticality in his game for a guy that was at one point like a lob threat, a guy that was very dangerous in that kind of two-man game with Harden, and he can still kind of catch that little drop pass and go up and dunk it, but he's not a high-flying around the rim guy, which he was able to do at one point in his career, which has been disappointing, and that's something that I really look for in a backup center, especially alongside James Harden, because we've seen Embiid kind of do it, but that's not his game either. He's not a high flyer. Like, he'll catch a lob every once in a while, and nor do I want him doing those things considering the injury risk and everything that comes with that. But adding that as kind of a tool to the backcourt would be nice. That's not Trez. I don't know. Defensively is where I'm just going to continue to get caught up on. And it's one thing now, like, I don't really care in the regular season. He can innings eat as much as he wants throughout these regular season, but that goes back to, like, we know Montrezl Harrell is not a guy that can hold up as backup center in the postseason. And we've seen it under Doc Rivers with the Clippers and throughout his career. Like, the evidence is in the film. So, like, the same time of using him through these times, you're kind of blowing a chance to see if Paul Reed can be that guy. And in fairness to Paul Reed, I do think he's gotten better this year. Like, I think he's looked a little bit more like a normal basketball player. He's kind of cut out some of the nonsense, some of the just spastic kind of movements or doing things kind of crazy. And he's not going to continue to do that unless he's getting the opportunity. So as much as it's great, and like Trez has been pretty fine through this recent stretch, it's like, we know what we got with there. I still want to fully see what there is in Paul Reed, and I don't think we're going to get that chance.
Yeah, and to add on to that, one thing I will agree with you on there is, the Sixers are one of the worst rebounding teams right now, and Paul Reed can be an absolute spark at many points in the game. There have been games, a lot of people talk about matchup-based, whatever it is. There are points in a game where, I physically say out loud, like, this is a Paul Reed moment. Joel, it looks gassed, and Tobias isn't in, and nobody's getting rebounds, and we're watching 3 offensive rebounds in a row come right off the rim, go back up, second chance points, way too easy. Those are moments where Paul Reed would shine. And I do agree, we've seen that potential, and it's the same way I felt about Isaiah Joe. If he just got more run, if he got a little more consistency, give him a chance to get in his rhythm. It's the same way I feel about Thybulle right now. Maybe we would get more out of the players that we are trying to breed here. And yeah, you're right. Trez has shown his cards, and come playoff time, I don't think he can be that consistent. And I think it'll definitely be maybe the most, major area of concern come trade deadline, because right now, I don't know if you can go into the playoffs with either one of them and rely on them for, 8-10 minutes off the bench, maybe 6-8 minutes. Especially if Embiid's banged up a little bit, you are going to need more reinforcements there. And I don't think it can be a small ball lineup either.
Yeah, and I think that's something that they're going to try to do at least. I think there's a real chance that Doc just tries to go with PJ Tucker as the small ball five come postseason time. And I don't know if they want to run like some sort of 5-out offense and have Harden have a Harden and his boys from the Rockets kind of as the squad there. But it's also like you just mentioned, like they're not a good rebounding team even when at full strength. And Joel Embiid is putting up worse since his rookie year numbers, averaging under 10 rebounds per game. I get like there's so much on his plate. How much of these rebounding issues do you think you put on Joel versus like the team as a whole schematically, or where is this issue really coming from?
So a lot of people want to look directly at Joel. They want to continue to point the finger. I'm sorry, I just can't do it. Now, I'm
It's
not
hard to.
saying he has no fault or no blame. Yes, there are times where I watch Joel, just view a guy go right into the paint, waltz right in, easy layup or easy miss, easy rebound and tap it back in. So I'm not saying there's no fault with Joel, but when you look at how the offense is run, it's really a James Joel type of offense. And many times, or at least some of the time, we've seen James get off to a little bit of a struggle where Joel has to go for 20 in the first quarter, or he's got to go for 15 in the third quarter to get us back in the game before he rests. And even then, he doesn't come back in until 6 minutes to go because he's trying to get his breath. And I just can't put it all on Joel. I think what makes a team really good is having an athletic four. And unfortunately, Tobias is not that guy. And unfortunately, one thing I have been wrong on is that, and all of us, I mean, we thought PJ at this point in the season would at least be giving us more than he's given us. I mean, at this point, there's constant box scores of just zeros. Like if PJ Tucker could get in there and horse a little bit and give a couple rebounds, and Tobias was more athletic, I think there wouldn't even be any issue at all. The problem is there's not another guy like that. And maybe Paul Reed could be that guy. But the problem is, I don't know if he can hold up offensively. So we just need more athleticism on the team. We need a pure rebounder, a guy that can go up and just take a little bit of the burden off Joel's shoulders. And I guess to answer your question, no, I don't put a lot of that on Joel. I think he is carrying a lot of burden with the offense.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I have a hard time kind of putting it on Joel because of like just how much is on his plate already. It is, I would like to see those numbers go up a little. I don't need the under 10 a game. Like I just got to see a little more than that. But at the same time, my feelings on Joel, and I've always felt this way, is I don't think he's a particularly great rebounder. I think he's a guy who's obviously 7 foot plus and they're going to end up with the ball in his hands a lot. But I don't think he's a guy who has a knack for just ending up with rebounds. Like you can see guys who are like that around the league. Like Dennis Rodman's the long-term clearest example of a guy who was undersized. Charles Barkley, another one who at 6'5" could lead the NBA in rebounds because of the way he can read it. That's not Joel. He's a guy who, because he's that big, he can pull him in and do it. But he's not a guy who just reads it great off the glass. And I feel like he's gotten maybe slightly worse or slightly less, maybe less locked in on it is the better way. Cause you see the times where he does kind of flip the switch and has the, like, I'm getting this rebound, and he does, he pulls it off. He can do it, which I guess kind of leads to more frustration from people of why isn't that all the time? But it's hard to have that switch all the way up for 48 minutes or however long he's on the court. And with just how much he's doing is hard. And that athleticism is a great point and something that I would love to add, especially I think about it in the offense all the time. You see this around other teams in the NBA where they have that kind of like backdoor cut that leads to a lob. And that's just something that isn't in the Sixers offense whatsoever. And especially playing off guys like Harden and Embiid, like that absolutely would be there. Like if Tobias could be a guy who could cut backcourt and take a slam dunk, take an alley-oop and put that through, that's just something else that would be huge and just kind of like another option to have. And I don't mean to slander Tobias too bad, because for the most part, I have been team Tobias this year and he has been doing his thing. We've talked a little bit and texted back and forth kind of about additions to this team. You kind of alluded to that you don't think the backup center is enough, which I definitely see the point in. Wing to me is also a massive concern. And to circle it back to something else you mentioned, the decision to release both Isaiah Joe and Charles Bassey leading up to this season, which it looked like it was going to be one or the other decision. The Sixers ended up going both. And the reason behind that was for the cap flexibility, the roster flexibility to make a move. that only works out if that move actually happens. So there's going to be needs to be something done. How do you kind of feel that like they're going to target this or prioritize things when looking? And do you think that has potential to age extremely poorly?
Well, there's a lot of great points there, a lot to unfold. In To the first point, in terms of what I would expect us to do at the trade deadline, I for some reason don't feel like we're going to do that much. And the reason I feel that way is one, when you look around the league right now, there's not many players that I'm hearing about, oh, they're going to be available. They're going to, one out, they're asking out. Now maybe that'll heat up in the next month and a half, but there's just not many of those commodity types around the league. I mean, Kuzma's been a hot topic, but he brings a lot of salary as well, compared to what we can afford. Like you said, I mean, we don't have a lot of flexibility right now. And that's kind of the other reason, I don't think there is many viable options out there for the Sixers. Now, maybe we can find something. Maybe we can work a trade out. Who knows? But right now, this does not feel like a prior trade deadline to me. It doesn't feel like, okay, something is going to happen with the Sixers like I felt in the past. The other thing, though, is that I think the Sixers need to utilize more of what they have. You talk about Isaiah Joe. I will say it until, I'm blue in the face. I will continue to say it. That was a terrible decision. People can talk about he's only averaging 6 points on OKC. Well, guess what? He doesn't play that much because they have a lot of young guys in the rotation. But when he does play, for example, against the Sixers, he hits a couple threes. And that was a guy you could have developed. And then when I look at a guy like Matisse Thybulle, that's a guy you can develop. People want to bring up the stats, but what I'm seeing with my eyes is that Matisse Thybulle is at least a little more willing to shoot. He comes in, he gets 5 minutes a game every couple games. He at least puts up a shot now. And I'm not saying that Matisse is going to be that future guy or can be, but Matisse Thybulle is a guy you have here right now. You don't have to figure out a way to trade for him or to go sign him. And you have him right here. So why not develop your first round picks? Jaden Springer, is he ever going to play? This is a philosophy and just like a structure issue that we're having with this team. And the guys we do have that show potential, are not getting that run, or we get rid of them and we make an open roster spot. So not to take it off of the topic here of discussion, but I think in addition to the trade deadline and looking at that, I don't think people should get their hopes up that much. I think we should also try to use the guys that we have here on the bench and try to develop them because, we're running tight right here. We don't have a lot of draft picks to throw around, and man, it's looking scarce right now for the Sixers.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and that's something we've seen, and that also ties into the Doc Rivers veteran thing, as far as not being willing to give guys a chance. Like the Isaiah Joe and Charles Bassey ones are going to be the crystal clear examples because they were literally on this roster last year and showed flashes in Sixers uniform. Like it's not even like they looked poorly when they got their opportunity and Doc had to shut them down. Like both those guys had some really nice moments like when they got a chance, and it just didn't happen very often. And we see them kind of flourishing on their other teams. And I get they're both on rebuilding situations where they have more time to kind of play through their stuff. But at the same time, those are valuable players that were drafted with Sixers draft picks that are now kind of gone and have gone to other teams. And the more that they flourish, the more the Sixers should still kind of have to look at that and be like, that could be ours because that could be the case. And I think both those guys are legitimate rotational players and will be for the rest of their careers. So it stinks to look at it like that. And then when we talk about what we have right now, Jaden Springer, I mean, I've given up hope on it actually happening this year because I just can't see a world in which they give him an opportunity. But I still feel like it's one of those like at least give him a shot. Let's see what he's got. And then Matisse Thybulle, like you brought up, very unique player and just unique career trajectory because there's been times where Matisse has kind of seemed like a little bit of the golden boy where he's kind of this can't wait to see what he turns into, could be this elite defensive piece. And then there's been moments, especially of late, where he's just buried on the bench and it feels like there's no hope for him. So talk a little bit about what you think the role for Matisse could be moving forward. And do you think he's going to work his way into a more expanded role? And do you think he will, or do you think he should? I guess might be two separate questions.
Yeah, I think it's unpredictable. I really do. And I can't put my finger on it. This is the one guy I'm so confused on. You talked about his trajectory in terms of his career, even in this season. I just don't understand. You come into the season and you're praising this guy to the Lord. You're saying he was the most improved. He was the hardest worker this offseason. and everybody's excited. You know, they show the videos of him in training camp. He's shooting threes and his form is improved. And then he doesn't really play. He doesn't play to start the season. And you're wondering what is going on here. Is this a trade kind of technique? Are you trying to play his value up and move him off? And at this point, it hasn't been. Like there haven't been any advanced talks. There hasn't been anything more on it other than a little whisper saying that, you know, Daryl Morey might be looking to explore a trade. So my thing is, if you have him here, you have to play him. And this goes back to the trade deadline thing. Like, yes, he should be playing. I just don't think he's going to get that advanced role. I don't know why. To me, he's at least shown a little bit of potential. Like last year, watching Matisse Thybulle, in my opinion, it was almost like unwatchable. I was watching him and he couldn't stay on the floor. And then the whole playoff situation happened and he just looked absolutely lost. To me, he's a little bit more comfortable on the floor. And yes, he's got to limit the fouls. Yes, he's got to work on the jump shot. I mean, shooting 35% from deep, which is a little bit below league average. It's not awful. You know, it's not in the 20% where he just can't shoot at all. He just needs a little more opportunity. And I don't understand why he will not get that. I can't put my finger on it. We're 35 games into the season and he barely plays. He scratches the surface. Yesterday, he came in. I thought he did a decent job against CJ McCollum. Then he goes out. He comes in the first quarter. He'll get a couple minutes in the fourth quarter, doesn't play. That also messes a guy's mental up. And this goes back to all the other players we just talked about. You have to let them get in a rhythm or else it's just not going to work. And that is something that Doc Rivers does not do. And I really think it messes with the player's psyche a little bit.
Yeah, I agree with that as well, and it's difficult. And for shooting splits specifically, like you mentioned with Thibault, it's so hard on the limited basis that he gets and how much like a singular shot will impact things up and down. He started the season on like a career low trajectory, shooting like 19% from three at one point and hovering below 20. He's all the way up, like you said, just right below league average. I think he went 3 for 3 in that Thunder game. He definitely made 3 threes. I think he only shot 3. Those are all like great signs, and I agree. I think he has been more willing. That's something that's been talked about a ton, and that's what I really need to see from him is like just that willingness, just that not being afraid to shoot it, because we have seen that in the past with him, of him passing up shots or just not really looking at it. And I think when looking at his kind of trajectory, and I get this isn't a perfect comparison because they're definitely different, but I think he should be looking towards that PJ Tucker type of model versus a D'Anthony Melton type of model, which I think is oftentimes thrown upon him. Thibauld's tried his best to improve as a ball handler, and I think he's gotten a little bit better. But like, be a guy that it's okay to shoot once or twice in a game if you can do those things defensively. And Thibauld's never going to be quite the rebounder or the grunt, just hard work, throw his body on the line guy that PJ Tucker is. But you should be able to do the skill set things that Tucker kind of does on an every game basis. And that's who you should be modeling your game out of, because he's found a way to carve out a career without really scoring much points. And he's been below expectations from what just about everyone expected for us, Tucker, that is. But he's still, for the most part, that's who he is. He's a guy who doesn't do his damage in the box score. He's a do the little things, be a great teammate, do the hustle plays and everything that benefits the team. And I personally am also pushing the mindset and the narrative of let's give PJ Tucker a nice little vacation here midseason. Let's like shut him down for a couple games. Whatever this dead arm that he's talking about he's dealing with is, that you just don't need to play through it while we're in January. Like, go rest up. You're 37 years old. We have 3 more years of you under contract. It's like, we need you healthy when it matters most, man. Let's give a break and let's see what these other guys can do, like Matisse Thybulle, like Paul Reed. George Niang, I thought, has done a fine job playing as a 4. I thought he did a pretty good job on Zion last night of putting his body on the line, doing his thing, which is not something I kind of expected to say. And he's making up for his kind of lack of quickness with his thickness. So shout out to George Niang for making it happen. And yeah, so I don't know. For Matisse specifically, I can't say like I see a legitimate role being carved out for him. And also, one more point here is like the amount of zone that the Sixers have switched to. That's Matisse Thybulle's like thing. Like, that's what he's been known. He played zone all 4 years of college at Washington. That's all they did. That's what he did when he came to the league. If we're going to be playing zone defense, there's zero reason why Matisse Thybulle shouldn't be on the court. A Thybulle and Melton backcourt will absolutely wreak havoc on opposing teams. So that's a card that Doc kind of has in his like hand. Let's deal it out once in a while.
I agree. And I like the point you make about him kind of replicating what Tucker does in some ways. You know, I've seen Matisse Thybulle be able to cut to the basket. It seems like something they try to work with him on. But, you know, the like one of the issues that it goes back with for me is like, where's the development at? You know, how do we separate the player versus the team and the organization. We've seen many guys now not be able to develop, and we throw these names out like Matisse Thybulle and Jaden Springer, and they're not going to live up and they're not ready in this. These are first round picks that we invested years and losing seasons and just struggle into. I mean, to get all of these assets, and then we have to, sacrifice some assets, for example, to get James Harden, et cetera. And it's like, man, we need some of these guys to step up. Look at the Celtics. Look how many players on the Celtics have become key role players that they've drafted in the last 5 years. Same thing with the Warriors, et cetera. So, we need to demand more. And whether that falls with the player or whether that falls with the organization, just, in terms of the development, it just hasn't been there. And I think that is one of the fatal flaws right now for the Sixers team. And if they don't get to where they need to get, and this ends up being a blow up situation, which is down the line, but if that does happen, we need to look at ourselves for the lack of development with these players. And I just think it needs to be better.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think some of that is just being willing to kind of go through the growing pains. Like, I get this is a win now contending team. I get like the goals are right here in front of them and need to be accomplished now, but you still kind of have to live through this. If Thibault has a nice like 0 for 10 streak, like ride with that. The next one's going to be like 6 for 10 and even out, because that's kind of how shooting works for guys who are on that lack of volume and that type of thing. And as far as like when you talk about those other organizations, terrific examples of what they do is just give a guy like one job when he starts out and then kind of slowly build onto that. There's no reason why Jaden Springer can't just be given the job of go defend this guy. That's all you need to do. Don't even worry about touching the ball offensively. And I have seen a little bit of Springer this year. I won't say I watched every Blue Coats game, but I've watched here and there. And he has gotten better. Like, he's showing strides of maturity in his game, looking more controlled, looking more composed. And I wouldn't say he's NBA ready by any means. We knew he was raw when they drafted him, but like you got to help him in his development, as your point is. And the last kind of thing I want to get into here is, I guess, the guy that has outshone expectations more so than anybody in recent Sixers history is Tyrese Maxey, and finally making his return to the court after a little bit over a month absence, the longest that he personally has ever missed from basketball. He's been a guy that's been very healthy throughout his whole life. Kind of, you can tell he's kicking off some rust here, shooting a little over 37% from the field, 25% from three since he got back. Is there any level of concern for you for Tyrese Maxey as far as his play and as far as fitting into the Sixers team?
Not a doubt in my mind when it comes to Tyrese Maxey. And it's really nice for once to have a player where, we can look at them and say, yeah, he's going to be just fine. And the reason is because he works diligently. Like, he won't settle for less. And that's what I love about Tyrese Maxey. He wants to be great. He loves the game. He loves the city. But most all, like, he just wants to be the best version of himself. He won't let an injury derail his season or take him away. And it was nice to see him get going last night. He had the little spark off the bench, and he looked a lot better in just, one game. So imagine what he's going to be, in a month, 2 months. I guess the biggest question is, how are we going to integrate him back into the offense? And that is, not going to lie, a worry for me, because we saw what it looked like in the first stretch of games this season. And now you kind of have the concrete down, right? You have James Harden, Joel. They found that rhythm. How do you get Maxey going? What role are you going to use him in? And how can you get him his touches? How can you assure Maxey's not going to end up as a spot-up shooter for half of a game? That's really what it comes down to me. He has so much talent. He has so much to offer to this team, but you can't let him, get lost out there during games. You can't let him get out there and just not know what he's supposed to be doing. So that's really the biggest thing I'm going to look for. But in terms of the injury, I have no concern at all.
Yeah, definitely. And there's got to be just more thrown on his plate. Like that's kind of what we need from him, is he can't be an afterthought in this offense. He's too good to just be a spot up shooter. And I totally agree. I'm not worried in the slightest about him getting back to the player he was prior to the injury this year. He looked like he had already taken another stride forward this year, averaging over 20 points per game, which is pretty crazy. The 3-point volume has increased. Efficiency has stayed just about the same, which is as good a sign as we could hope for. He's terrific, and I think he's going to be great. I think he's going to be very helpful in increasing the pace of this team, especially next to James Harden, who we know can milk that shot clock and take his time up the court at times. So having a little contrast there is great. there definitely needs to be a way to optimize the trio of Maxey, Harden, and Embiid, and that's going to be the biggest storyline to watch. Realistically, like, we still don't fully know what we have in this Sixers team because there just hasn't been enough time of these three playing together. The previous game against the Pelicans was just their 8th game this season where all three of them were active, which is nuts at this stage. So there's plenty to build on. I'm excited for what's going to be, and I think it just provides more versatility with Doc Rivers for staggering the Maxey and Harden and Embiid, and just avoiding that kind of death lineup, like you said. And to me, that's what I'm definitely going to be looking out for. Do you have any kind of preference on pairing them as far as like splitting up Harden and Embiid versus including Maxey, or any thoughts on that, or too early to tell?
So my personal opinion, and I've seen a lot of people talk about this, they want Maxey to come off the bench. I don't think that's the right way to coin it. I think what it should be is Maxey runs with the bench unit, but plays starter minutes. Like right now, the lineup that I'm looking at, honestly, this 3-guard lineup is very intriguing. You look at Maxey, Harden, and Melton. And if Tobias Harris can get back to this, shooting spree he was on where he's just knocking down, and you have that 2-man game running with James and Joel. Now, another twist into it, now that we have this pick and roll game down and we see that it works, because you and I talked about this all season. Why are you not running this? I think you can even throw another ripple into it and let Maxey run pick and rolls with Joel Embiid if Harden can be a little better of a spot up shooter. And once you have that going and you have Melton who can spot up and you have Tobias who can spot up, this offense becomes so dynamic. So what I would actually do is run that starting 5 as of right now, see how it works. I would have Tucker come off the bench. Like you said, just give him a little time to, get healthy and get better. And then I would probably make the first sub Tyrese Maxey and let him run more with the second unit throughout the game. But let him obviously come back for the closing lineup, because I think he's just too good to come off the bench per se, to begin a game. That just wouldn't make sense to me.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's the right way to frame it. And I think you bring up a lot of good points there. The only concern I kind of have with making it work is the Sixers have spoken all year about like this defensive identity. And if that is going to be the case, I'm not sure I can fully buy in as a Harden Maxey backcourt being able to pull that. And I get Embiid pulls the highest responsibility in that. He's leading the NBA in defensive rating, individual defensive rating so far this year, which is I'm kind of surprised of, because I don't think it's been his best moments defensively even so far. But just the load that he carries and anchoring that defense is huge and is going to be the greatest impact. But when we're talking about matching up with teams with some elite guards on the perimeter, guys like Kyrie Irving, Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland, you can go down the list. Jaylen Brown, even I'll throw in there. Like, neither one of these guys is going to kind of hold up in those type of matchups, and that's kind of tough. And that's why D'Anthony Melton is so key. I think it's going to be extremely important to find 30 to 35 plus minutes for this guy on an every night basis, especially come postseason time. I think Melton is going to prove to be that important to this team from a complementary skill set aspect to these guys. And he definitely, in my mind, has been the crown jewel of the additions this offseason. He's been everything I could have hoped to and more. I'm very interested to see how that's going to play out. And I think these next couple weeks, we're going to have a chance to key in on that and how exactly that looks, if that 3-guard lineup can hold up. And if Melton can prove that he can guard up a little bit despite just being 6'2" and guard some wings, that opens up everything for the Sixers team.
Yeah, exactly. And I agree. Melton has been just absolutely unreal, man. I love his game. I love what the future holds for him. I think he can only get better. And man, he's just another worker. He just goes out there. He's always hustling. He's always moving around. And he's just a good guy to have on your team. He's a ball player that, will impact the game in some way. And I've been really impressed with how he's playing. So I hope he does see more minutes.
Yeah, definitely. And Sixers have, I wouldn't say an easy stretch here, but some winnable games coming up in the future. Got the Pacers next, Bulls next. They got a back-to-back against the Pistons, play the Thunder again. So a couple winnable games in the future. Things seem to be looking up a little bit. RB, we'll wrap it up here. What's kind of your general consensus on the outlook of this team? Are you bought in? Are you starting to believe that they can be a contender? Do you still need to see more? What are you thinking?
Not to avoid your question, but it's unpredictable for me.
Yeah.
Like, it's really hard to say because we haven't seen it together for a stretch. We saw these guys together for a stretch early, but it took time to get that chemistry down. It took time to get them going together. And then again, we weren't really running an effective pick and roll. And I think if you utilize that 2-man game of James and Joel, and find ways to get Maxey incorporated. And now Tobias shooting this way. Obviously, he's been a little bit cold, but with these guys stepping up, I think, like you said, the next stretch here is really what will tell us about this team. Now that they've had time to play together and get together, they can show us what they can be. They can show us the potential here. Obviously, they went on a big winning streak, but now I want to see what it looks like with Maxey as well. So yeah, it's just really unpredictable. But I think they have the talent that can get us where we need to go. I don't agree with people that say, Daryl Morey didn't do enough and we just don't have the guys. I think we have a pretty good squad. Now, we can obviously add to that, but these guys are going to have to play together the right way, and Doc Rivers is going to have to orchestrate it all. So we'll see if it happens, man.
Yeah, totally. And this is going to be the stretch where it's time to build some momentum, keep building, build the chemistry, figure out how to play, because there's some tall tests to end the year, a brutal schedule down the stretch. So this is the time where it's good to start banking some wins, climb up the Eastern Conference a little bit, and I'm excited to see it. So overall, I'm pretty bought in on this team, getting excited. I'm ready to just see exactly what we're working with over the next couple weeks and see how things stand up. So RB, I appreciate you for hopping on with me today. Give a little final shout out for where everybody can find your stuff, and we'll log on off out of here.
Thank you for having me on, Sean. Always a pleasure, man. Look forward to continuing to talk with you. You can subscribe to me on YouTube, Philly Take with RB, and follow me on Twitter as well at RB Philly Take. And yeah, man, I'm excited, and hopefully we can rack together some wins. We definitely need it. We definitely need it.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks again for coming on. Appreciate all you guys for tuning in. Make sure to drop a like and subscribe on this if you haven't already. And I will talk with you next time.